Hello, my name's Marcus,
I'm Fionn.
and you're listening to the Recovery Hub podcasts,
Knowing the Score with Eternal Media.
a drug education and alcohol education series of podcasts.
This is a co-production between Eternal Media, Meddwl Ymlaen, Mind Our Future, and North Wales Area Planning Board. In this episode of Knowing the Score, we come together as the production team to reflect on the interviews we recorded.
Thank you for that, Fionn. Hi everyone, I'm Luke. Today we're going to go in chronological order of the episodes that were released in the podcast. So that began with Marcus's episode, and Marcus was interviewed by Ryan and Carlos. So we'll start with you, Ryan. The day after that interview, I asked whether or not you'd mentioned it to your family, the conversation that you had. So a week later, has it come up with them?
I still haven't told them.
Will you eventually?
Probably my mum and dad, as they will understand more, but I don't think to my brother and sisters, because they both have a hidden disability, so it'll take some time to explain to them, and then it'll take even longer for them to understand. So when the time is right, yes, but for now, not at the moment, because I'm on the waiting list for a hidden disability, so it's trying to find words to explain it to them. Sometimes I struggle and I stammer and stutter, and sometimes I'll just come out with it straight away. So it depends on how I feel and how they take it.
I see. Is addiction something that you've encountered through observation through other people, or?
No, I've not had much encounter with it. It's nothing that I would see normally, because at the end of the day, we're just trying to get by.
And for yourself, Carlos, what were your thoughts?
I found the session really interesting. I think it's probably important to reflect on thinking about how I felt before we went into these interviews. I didn't really know what to expect. And I was told that we were going to be interviewing recovering addicts, and I didn't really know how to relate to that beforehand. And I was slightly anxious, but really intrigued. And
what made you anxious?
Well, I think I was anxious because it was unknown territory for me, and I don't think I've been in a situation where I've been able to have a really open and genuine conversation with somebody that's had some of those hardships and actually come out on the other end on top. But it became really obvious from talking to Marcus really soon on that actually there was loads of similarities there, and there was a lot that he was saying that I could relate to personally, and there was a lot that I could relate my friends and my family's lifestyle to too, which kind of made me really, really intrigued more than anything. I was super intrigued to find out about how he got to where he was, the journey that he went through to get into recovery, and then his journey through recovery too.
Did it break down any stereotypes that you may have had?
It didn't necessarily break any stereotypes down. I was definitely surprised to find that a lot of what Marcus was saying I found relatable to myself. So Marcus talked a lot about having an addictive personality, and it didn't mean just addiction to vices. It was addiction to food, it was addiction to computer games, it was addiction to things that I could completely relate to. And I found that really, really interesting. And yeah, I don't think it necessarily broke down any stereotypes, not for me personally at least, but that's not to say it didn't do that for Ryan. So yeah, I found it really interesting. I left, and I remember talking to my partner about it that evening, and I was just really quite blown away by the whole experience. And to be perfectly honest, it's something I'd recommend to other people to do. You know, if they had the opportunity to have that open, genuine conversation where people aren't showboating, they're not showing off, they're just talking from their heart, and they're talking about their own personal experiences. It's a real interesting learning curve for people.
Chris has a question, so go ahead, Chris.
Hi, I was thinking about the bit you mentioned about addictive personality and how you could relate to similar things. Did it make you reflect on yourself and think about how there's things that you like that maybe you might be at risk of developing into an addiction or anything?
Yeah, really interesting observation, Chris. So the answer is absolutely. With almost everything I do in my life, I take things too far, to the point where I know actually I need to wind it back a little bit, because it's getting in the way of my relationships, getting in the way of my work, it's getting in the way of sort of healthy habits within my life. It's one of the reasons why I've always been really hesitant about trying any sort of substances that might be quite addictive, because I just don't trust myself and my own personality to not get sucked into that. So actually, I suppose the conversation I had with Marcus more than anything kind of reinforced that sort of that understanding that I have of my own sort of self and my own addictive personalities when it comes to things like that.
What was the experience like with Eternal?
Working with Eternal Media is something completely different. I didn't think that I would be here doing a podcast, as in I haven't had the experience before. But after the session, I went, oh, I quite like making a podcast. And I told my colleagues in work, and they're like, oh, well done, it's a big achievement. So, yeah, great.
Yeah, it's not easy getting in front of the mic, is it? But you did really well. I felt I was interviewed really well. And I think we covered a lot of ground and stuff that I didn't even think I was going to talk about. You covered and you got me talking. So really well done. And to yourself, Carlos. I think we're a bit too similar in our thoughts, aren't we? And some red flags there for you, Carlos.
Yeah, there's definitely red flags there.
And the things that I was thinking then as you're talking, yeah, there's lots of similarities, but I didn't have that awareness about myself at the age where I started drugs. And how old are you now? In your 50s?
36.
So in your late 30s now, that you'd have a lot more awareness of yourself because you've lived with yourself a lot longer than I did when I was like 12, 14, when I started taking bits and pieces of stuff.
Well, I was probably about 15 when those influences started coming in my life.
Yeah.
And my friends started taking harder drugs and
stuff. And you had that awareness about yourself.
I was quite firm on not going down those avenues. And it's because I didn't trust myself and I didn't trust my own ability to be able to stop. And that might be because there's a bit of a history of addiction in my family with my dad and my mum. My dad with substance abuse and my mother with alcohol abuse. But it wasn't really openly discussed. It was more observed. So it might be from that. I don't know.
That might be half the battle won. If you can have that awareness about yourself at that age, it could really influence the rest of your life.
Just to go back to your other question, though, on how did I find working with Eternal Media? So this is the second project that we've been involved with you guys now, and I got to say, both times that we've worked with Eternal Media, it's been incredibly accessible. Like, you make things really easy. There's no real barriers for ourselves or the young people to actually get involved. Everything feels really comfortable and professional, and real joy to work with in regards to how did I find it.
Thanks, Carlos. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, we love working with you guys. The next episode you listened to was Lowry. Lowry's been an amazing friend of Eternal for years now. She's got a really strong recovery. Lowry has been in touch with some feedback. Have a listen.
I just wanted to say a massive thank you for allowing me to be a part of the project. It just inspired me by their wanting to understand and their wanting to know more about addiction and recovery. The generation that comes after us are the ones that can change the lives of others, and so being able to be a part of that was really powerful to me. It was good fun, they could have a laugh and they could really take it seriously as well. So it's such a privilege to be a part of something like that, and I wish them all the best going forward, and I hope they can take this message and make the right decisions for themselves and pass that message on as well, understand the dangers and the risks and how we can recover, and not to judge anybody for it because it's not a choice. I can't thank Eternal enough for what you've done for me. You, Marcus, have supported me all the way through my journey and continue to do so, and you continue to save the lives of many, many people every day, by spreading these messages and spreading the hope and getting people involved on projects like that it's life-changing, really. So a massive thank you from me, and good luck to the kids as well.
Macy, what are your thoughts when you interviewed Lowry?
As Macy's nonverbal, I'm going to read out her thoughts. And Macy says, I found the thing that stood out for me is that regardless of her family dynamic, which was a positive area for her, but her route down that path went negatively in order to be listened to kind of thing. And that easily could have been anyone. You don't necessarily have to have a negative factor in your life to go down such a negative path.
Theon, what did you think?
As dramatic as it sounds, I definitely left a different person I was someone completely different when I walked into who I was when I walked out. Because I think there is a lot of stereotypes when you think about people who have like suffered with addiction, whether that's drugs or alcohol. And I do have the experience with it, but I think it completely changed my perspective, and it's actually definitely changed the way I interact with those people and like kind of what I think about it, because there's a lot of things that I probably felt and still feel while they were like going through these kinds of things, but now I can kind of take it in an outside perspective and go like kind of understand, yeah, right, it's not exactly how it felt to me in that moment. I think I learnt a lot of different things, a lot of random things, but I took a lot from it and I thought about it for a very long time after I left, and I still am. And I've also talked about it a lot, and kind of I think I just used the, I'm going to say, knowledge and everything that was talked about after I left. What really stood out was it can happen to anybody. Lowry was very like successful in school and in kind of all the other aspects of her life, and she did kind of reiterate that she did always have the support of her family, but she still kind of turned down the road of addiction. I think it made me really think, but also appreciate, like, that could have been me, that could have easily been me. I'm no different. She was in top sets for everything, and she enjoyed sports, and she was actually really close with her family, and all of those things I can relate to. So for a while, I was just sat thinking, oh, actually, that it doesn't necessarily matter where you start off from. You can always go down that path. I think what also really stood out was that everybody has their reasons for doing it. Drugs, from what I've learned, drugs have different effects on different people, but at the end of the day, it gives whoever's taking them something, no matter what that something is, and it's that something that leads them to keep taking. It's not just because they want to or because it's fun or all the stereotypical things that you would just assume. A lot of people do have a good reason, and a lot of people do have a genuine reason for not stopping as well.
Fionn, how did you find it working with Eternal Media?
I learned so much. I learnt so much every time. Obviously, as I said, I had the honour of interviewing Lowry and Zoe, and obviously even today, I've learnt a lot. Every time someone says something and every time someone speaks, it's made me kind of realise that if you listen carefully enough, then you have something to learn. So like today, you said in a lot of kind of situations, self-awareness can kind of save you from going down the same path as someone else. Lowry and Zoe also did say, obviously, like Carlos said, addiction isn't always just as clear as drugs and alcohol. It can show itself in other things, and sometimes it is just that, oh, just one more that actually pushes people over the edge. But there's just so many small things that I have learned that are like, to me, are life lessons, even though they're just small pieces of information.
And Macy
said, I found working with Eternal Media very accessible for me. As I am non-verbal, they really accommodated me and made me involved in the process, like it was no issue.
Right, thank you, Macy. Thank you, Fionn. Did an amazing job.
All right, next we had the episode with Alex, and we have Levi here to talk about it. Alex has also sent us some feedback. Here it is.
Hi guys, this is Alex. It's always a great honour to do any work with you guys at Eternal Media. You help to carry such an important message. I think it's really important for people to start talking about addiction, and more importantly, to start talking about recovery, because that's not something you hear a lot about, and people do recover and they do get well. I really enjoyed the interview, actually, even though a little bit of it was actually uncomfortable. I'm really used to talking about my addiction and my recovery, but I've never been interviewed by anyone the same age as my son, really. And I guess the kind of questions they asked me made me think about things I hadn't thought about. So yeah, they asked me a lot of questions about when I was younger and how I started using drugs. And most people kind of focus on the end. And what really struck me was the fact I didn't talk about what I was going through when I was younger. I didn't realize how much I kept my feelings to myself. I don't know whether that was shame. I don't know whether it was because people my age just didn't talk about how they felt. I guess I didn't know that I felt different to my friends. I didn't know that I had a problem, and I didn't know that anyone else could help me with the way I was feeling. So when I found drugs and alcohol and they kind of took away all that overthinking and all that pain, I didn't question anything else. I didn't think, oh, maybe there's a better way. So that really did make me think, and it really did make me think about how maybe we can do things differently with kids in schools.
So, Levi, what were your main takeaways from the episode?
Hi, I'm Levi. The main takeaway, I think it was like main about like the education that was being put into schools, how there was like no awareness of help and support on how like for like young people to like understand like the issues drugs and alcohol can bring into like progressing into your life. They just talked about the consequence, as in like how it was like legalized, etc. But they didn't really explain like how it can affect you personally and how it would affect your family and everything else when it's explained in schools. Also, another factor is about like alcohol is like a drug, and it's like a similar type substance, and it's like that as it becomes addictive.
Yeah, and is that a new concept for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had a conversation, didn't we, about education in school, for how it was for Alex, how it was for myself, how it was for yourself with being homeschooled, and then with Josh, who's not in the room at the moment. But what was the same for all of us is that we didn't really get any education whatsoever, did we?
No.
Yeah, and that is one of the biggest shames, I think. All right, thank you for that, Levi. Okay, and the next episode was Ross's episode. Ross has also sent us some feedback. Let's hear it.
Hey guys, it's Ross Preston. Just wanted to drop you a quick voice note to say how grateful and how much fun I had working with you guys. From the moment I walked into the studio, you guys were amazing. The energy was electric. You made me feel so relaxed and so welcome. It was really easy to share a little bit about my story. You made me feel great, so I really, really enjoyed it. Absolutely fantastic. Talking to the young people, talking about some of the ambitions and their aspirations was just inspiring. I hope it was kind of what you were looking for, and I really hope that we get to work together again soon. It was brilliant. Thank you so much for including me. Much love. Keep working hard. Thank you. I'm doing a peace sign, but you can't see that. Never mind. Bye.
In the room with us was Chris, Ryan again, and we also had Arlo. Arlo didn't have a microphone at the time, but he was in the room, so he's going to comment as well. But we'll start with Chris.
Initially, I didn't really think too much like about, because I know there are a lot of stereotypes around like addicts and stuff, because as I mentioned in my interview, I have like a lot of addicts in my family, and I know the kind of things people say, and I know the stereotypes aren't really usually very true. And I didn't really know much going in. Like, I didn't know like anything. I didn't know I was interviewing Ross. I didn't know anything about Ross. So I didn't really have anything to build like preconceived notions about, which I think was good because it just kind of let me go in with like a blank slate.
One of the things that stood out with Ross was his sense of humour and his attitude towards his past. Did that surprise you? And why, if so?
Honestly, I wouldn't say it surprises me because kind of like how Carlos said before about with Marcus, I found it very relatable in the sense that I'm also very much the kind of person who tends to laugh about things in my past, like even like the worst stuff, because it just makes it a lot easier to talk about and a lot easier to think about. And honestly, it made sense to me. Like, that's the kind of way I know if I had ended up like that, that's how I would have approached it.
Ryan, you first interviewed Marcus where his substances were primarily heroin and crack cocaine. So with Ross, it was alcohol. And in terms of the differences between the impact that it had on their lives, what were they that you noticed that the similarities were?
There was one difference that I could distinguish between Marcus and Ross, is that Ross was more energetic and happy. You know, he was explaining how his past was, and he was laughing, adding jokes to it. Marcus was, on the other hand, more sentimental, put a lot of feelings behind it. So there was two completely different sides of the podcast, and both of which I will remember.
That's a really interesting observation, Ryan. I've kind of been accused in the past of being really blasé about my addiction. So that's something I haven't really heard before, but I guess I do kind of get emotional, and I don't know Ross's story. That was the first time I met him that evening. He came over from Manchester. He wanted to be a part of it, and you know, we welcomed him. The thing I've noticed about interviewing people in recovery and on different subjects, you don't have to go where I ended up, you know, street homeless in prisons and overdosing and dying a couple of times. And, you know, you don't have to have suffered the way I did to still have the same thoughts, feelings and emotions that I had. You don't have to go anywhere near that. It can be a totally different subject. It's how you feel about things. So those emotions you have and those thoughts you have around that. I can recount my misery like it was yesterday. You know, it'll be 11 years this year, but I can remember it like it was yesterday. I can remember the thing with heroin addiction is it's not an anesthetic in as such that alcohol, the nature of it is you forget, you blank out. A lot of people who drink will not remember what they did under the influence of alcohol. It's not the same with heroin. You remember everything. You don't have the luxury of not remembering. And I think it is a luxury not to remember. I remember everything like a blow by blow account. You know, I was really lucky to find my return ticket from hell.
One thing that I always hear from you is that you keep the pain close.
Yeah, it's part of the people in recovery. For me, anyway, it's a combination. What worked yesterday that kept me clean might not work today. I have to keep evolving and putting recovery capital into my life. When heroin was everything to me.
What is recovery capital?
Well, for me, recovery capital is building things in your life worth more than the drug itself. And when all you have, when my only reason for being was the getting and using of heroin, you have to build up quite a lot in your life that makes it worth not going back there. You know, I haven't fallen out of love with heroin. It's that strong. Even though it was 11 years ago, you know, it's still very tempting for me.
And after what it put you through.
And even what it put me through. Yeah. So I have to build up, you know, kind of so much stuff in my life that it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it.
And when you talk about your active addiction, that's not how you are in the rest of your recovery, is it? That you are a very upbeat and happy person in recovery.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. It's just that, you know, when you're taken back to situations, oh God. At the time, you know, getting shot at or stabbed, that was just a Tuesday. That was just, you know, that's just like an everyday thing that you go through. You know, getting kidnapped or whatever that was. That was just a, you know, part of your day. But now thinking back, it's like, wow, that is not normal.
Yeah, and that's no discredit to Ross in the way that he talks about his active addiction either. That's not a criticism at all at him. It's just how, for different people in recovery, they will have different methods of the way that they go about their recovery and the way that they look back at their active addictions.
For sure, it's different combinations I put in. You know, like I need a real creative outlet for my addiction, my obsession. Eternal covers that beautifully. No 2 days are the same. I mean, I'm not happy with doing the admin, but you know that admin isn't keeping me clean. But the fun stuff we do, like all the admin that I do, makes things like this happen that I really enjoy and helps a lot of people. So it's lots of different combinations I use in my recovery. And I think Chris was really like nailed it by saying people cope differently. Some people use humour to talk about incredibly painful situations that they went through. And I get that because I did it. I can remember doing that in rehab and that. I get it. So that was a really good point. I think you've both had really good points there. Well done.
Arlo, anything you want to say?
Hi, yeah, I'm Arlo. First of all, I'd never interviewed a recovering addict before, but also from the point of view of we're working with young people and listening to them ask the questions and open up a little bit about what's going on in their lives and how addiction appears to be. It appears to be everywhere in terms of it's so accessible. I would imagine most people will know someone who's been affected by it. So going back to the interview with Ross, my first observation was I could have been sat on a train with this guy having a chat and I'd have had no idea he was a recovering addict. There were no signs. He looked healthy, was positive. And that's, I guess naively, that's not what I was expecting. I was expecting to see some signs and to see some effects in the way he talked or the way he behaved. And he really was positive. The way he talked about his childhood and his successes in early life. He was, and this seems to be a bit of a recurring theme, he was a high achiever. Just got himself into a situation that he couldn't get out of. And that what was also interesting was coming off the alcohol. I had no idea how difficult that was from a physical point of view. The way he talked about that's some serious cold turkey withdrawals. Yeah, that's you can see why once you're stuck in that, once you're stuck addicted to the level he was with alcohol, how difficult that must be to come off it.
Okay, thank you, Arlo, Ryan, and Chris, for your thoughts there.
In the next episode, we interviewed Zoe. Here's the feedback she left.
I really enjoyed getting, interviewed by the youngsters involved in this project. They were so mature and they had such great feedback. And it was just nice not to be judged and to be listened to, So thank you so much, guys. I really enjoyed it. I hope everything goes well with the project. Thank you for letting me be a part of it. And Marcus, thank you for continuing that grassroots education that we've all come to know and love. Thank you very much.
Sophie, Zoe's pretty hard, isn't she?
Yeah, she's pretty cool.
Yeah. What a force of nature she is.
I think I really liked her strong opinions, to be fair.
Powerful.
Passionate?
She's been through a lot.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I was quite surprised at things like, I know it might seem small to other people, but like how long Zoe's addiction was.
Yeah.
And so
was it 30 years or something?
28, I believe.
Yeah. I think she's included the early stuff as well. So,
to me, it was really, really, really bizarre when talking about her school life and all these things, and actually learning that her addiction started really, really early. Like, I genuinely remember her saying that she used to purposefully get her mum to put her in timeout because she knew it was by the alcohol cabinet.
yes, that's right. She was quite strategic and cunning even at that age.
How old was she at that age?
I think she was really, wasn't she? Like,
I think she said 4 to 6 about that age.
Dead. She was pretty young. And strategically, she'd get herself in trouble because then it'd be a timeout, plonked by the alcohol cabinet.
And she'd take a sip.
And she'd have a go.
6 years old.
She was very young. Yeah.
And
but that's a cunning nature already at that age.
I think it's also bizarre that I don't actually, even though she was talking about that wasn't a part of her addiction. That was just something that she saw as like before it and leading up to it.
That was her wanting a head change even at that age. Even at a young age, she wanted to change the way she felt. And that's what drugs and alcohol do. They change the way we feel.
I think she repeated a few times that to her that was kind of like an escape. That was her way of stepping away from things, because obviously there was, to her, it felt like there was always something happening. So as Arlo said, a kind of reoccurring theme. She was a high achiever in school, even though she kind of hung out with the popular people and acted out and all this. She did say that her home life was okay up until her stepdad moved in, and like all these just small things that were kind of quite life-changing for her.
They just built up and up and up, and then she did talk about escapism, and the drugs and the alcohol did allow her to escape from situations that temporarily, and it probably made things worse, of course, but there was that escape. And I know that people can use it as an escape, and it's like anesthetic for life a lot of the times, temporary as it is, and it does make things worse, of course. And it's interesting how people get started on different substances for different reasons. Zoe was escape. Mine was kind of acceptance, to be a part of a gang, part of a group, because I felt different. I don't think Zoe... Maybe Zoe did feel different. Did she talk about feeling different as well?
I don't remember Zoe talking about that. Obviously, we both were there when interviewing Lowry, and I remember Lowry speaking about
Lowry was talking
how
about different.
like feeling lonely and like excluded kind of definitely led her towards using, whereas Zoe said that it was more of just trying to get away from everything that was happening in her life.
Yeah, that's to feel different, as we spoke about feeling different quite a bit. What's the takeaway from what you took away from Zoe's interview?
Well, as I said, to me it was quite bizarre, firstly, how long she was addicted for, so I think it was 28 years, and how young it started, even though she didn't quite class that as addiction yet. Again, something that's really interesting, especially right now, hearing what everybody has to say about their interviews and the interviews they did, is that she also had a pattern of addictive behaviour before she was actually addicted to using drugs and alcohol. So that was quite interesting, because she said she had a history of like addictions, like things with her mental health, like self-harm and kind of eating addictions, and even from a young age she was addicted to like having all the latest Barbies and all of this and all that. But another thing that stood out to me was how many times she went back. She spoke quite a bit about, obviously she had her first child and she got clean while she was pregnant, but then unfortunately after she had her first child she went back, and that happened a couple of times. And for like areas of my life that I relate to, like certain things that she actually said that for her the one thing that made her go back was going, oh, just one more, nobody'll notice. Like, I think that's stuck out to me because I see that in so many silly little areas of my life, like, oh, if I have like one more chocolate with a Quality Street box, then nobody's gonna notice. But like that, and for obviously other things like in my life, that stood out, and I've thought about it for a really long time.
You raise a really good point. I think a lot of people think addiction starts at the alcohol or the drug level. It doesn't. For a lot of us, it starts in when we're young. It could be food first. It could be computer games. It could be like a little bit of gambling in the arcade, 2p machines or 10p or whatever. It can be those little things at the beginning, that obsessive behaviour. And then at some point, if we're unfortunate enough to be introduced to drugs, it goes that way. It could quite easily go into sport or work. I don't see addicts as dropouts. I see them as really hardworking people that don't get a day off ever. And I think when people get into recovery, they have a lot of drive, and it's go on.
You saying that, what really amazed me was how much she passionately spoke about the fact that it was really hard to walk away from drugs, and it had a really big effect on her family, her daughters, her mum, and she just felt so pulled towards using and all the drugs that she was taking that nothing was a good enough reason for her to stop using.
Yeah,
Nothing was powerful enough to kind of give her the realization of, oh, I need to stop. Even though at one point she did say, like, as soon as she became a mum, she knew that she had to look after, she had all these responsibilities, she had to look after her daughter and change a nappy and do all these things, and she wanted to. The drugs and the escape and the feeling that they gave her managed to come across stronger to her, and again, that's what caused her to
That's how
use
powerful
again.
it is. That's just how powerful it is. And she's got her family back. She's worked hard. She's got her family back. She's got kids back in her life, and she's about to pass a BA honours, did she say?
Yeah, and 10 years in April.
Yeah, so, yeah, fair play, Zoe. Fionn, Arlo, thank you very much for that.
All right, and finally, we had Ian's interview, and that was myself in the room with Emma and Lucia and Arlo. And finally, let's hear Ian's feedback.
I thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity to do the interview. I thought the youngsters that were involved with the project were very impressive. The questions that they come up with were very good because it brought out a good message. All in all, great experience.
With Ian's story, what was the biggest surprise?
I think the biggest surprise was how fast he was able to recover. I feel like most stories you hear from recovering addicts, it's usually, it took me ages, I relapsed so much, I always think about going back. But with Ian, he said it was very straightforward for him. He was at a low, he got taken out of it because he went to prison. And while he was in prison, he went to meetings, he worked on himself, he even went on to help other people. And he said that he doesn't even think about going back to how he was, which to me, I think is strange because, like I said, through the stereotypes of other people and what I've heard from other people, it usually takes so long to get clean from these type of drugs, especially after doing them for so long. But I think it's quite inspiring that he just said, get your mind straight and just get out of it. Do whatever you need to do to get out of it, but just get out of it and eventually you'll just forget about it all.
So Ian was doing a lot for his recovery, and that's one of the things that when people get into long-term recovery, they do get to a place where they are doing a lot of work in their recovery to stay in recovery. And for certain people with different attempts into recovery, they don't do so much work in their first attempts, and then that, they will relapse, but they learn from it. So I think in that case, it's not that it's not possible for people to get into recovery and then get long-term recovery off of their first attempt. I just think it's that when you give people the resources and the knowledge of how to recover from the likes of meetings with CA, I think he was going to, wasn't it? Yeah, then he's going to learn a lot from people in long-term recovery, and he's going to get into long-term recovery with their support. So I think that just goes to show when the help and the support is out there, that's just what kind of difference it makes for people in their recovery rather than having to do it alone. And Emma, what did you think of Ian, Emma?
I thought he was an incredibly strong person, and I thought it was very inspiring, although that word's been used a lot. It is, to be fair, because to be addicted to such heavy, drugs. But I think it takes a lot to admit things. It takes a lot to talk about them, and it also takes a lot to get off things like that. And I know a lot of people who are addicted to alcohol and drugs, and they just say, oh, well, it makes me happy, because their brain's so, convinced that they are. But for him to come and tell us his story, how he got addicted to these things, and then the fact that he just went one day, obviously he didn't have a choice, but just bang, nothing. And I just thought that was very strong. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, to have it just completely taken out of your life in such a way. Yeah. Looking back at his childhood and how he grew up in a bubble, in his own words, didn't he? And with the way that we look at how people are raised, in terms of how we think that it affects people's likelihoods of developing addiction, is that something that you had in mind as one of the contributing factors for addiction, is someone's childhood?
I feel like it makes sense. People usually, because of things that have happened in the past, do other things to sort of balance it out, whereas because it's usually people who have been through past traumas or not had a great start to life that turn to things like that. But it was very interesting to hear somebody with such a sheltered background to then be pushed into the real world, especially in Liverpool, But to then just have this whole new life, it must have been crazy for him and for the people around him, I suppose.
And the stresses of life were one of the main things that he put it down to. The increased use of cocaine, especially due to the stresses of responsibilities, and that he thought he had his life together until he realized, oh, wait, I don't. So in terms of prevention, what are your thoughts on what people can do in life to prevent a similar situation in developing addiction?
I personally don't think there's a lot, because if a person wants to do something that they are capable of doing, they're going to do it. Like my mum always said to me, if you do anything, just be safe, make sure you know what's actually happening and what the, backlash can be, and, talk to me about it. So I've always been brought up to know that if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it anyway. If someone else is going to do it, they're going to do it anyway. You just have to be so aware. And also, instead of have a stigma around people like that, just be willing to listen and help, because even a conversation sometimes can do a lot for a person.
Yeah, like, don't turn your back on people once they're struggling.
Yeah, that's when they need you the most.
Any thoughts there, Arlo?
I think for both interviews that I was involved with, the interview ended with me wishing I could have more time chatting to these people. But I mean, Ian was really interesting. He was funny. He had lots to say. He was passionate about what he wanted to say. And same story as last time, where a nice childhood, nothing majorly went wrong during his childhood. One thing led to another, and he got addicted. And luckily, when he went to prison, he had the sense to make that decision, to conscious decision to stop being addicted. And again, once now he's recovering from the addiction, he still has other addictions. He talked about having compulsive urges to buy things. So that addictive personality is still there, and he still struggles with it massively. No problem with the cocaine, the alcohol. He's nailed that, but he still has issues with other stuff. But what I wanted to say was, what I found really interesting was listening to Lucke and Ems asking the questions and how addiction has affected them and their lives. So what I'd like to ask to Lucke was how did you find the interview to be something that has helped you in any way?
In a way, I think the way he said that he gained help from other people and resources that he had around himself, I think his advice and what he experienced gave me a new light towards how people with addiction feel, because in my world, I've had family members dealing with addiction and I never knew exactly what they experienced. I just wanted them to be okay. I wanted to be just a normal, family. But in a way, I didn't see what they were experiencing, because it's hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes when you haven't experienced the same things as them. And I've always wanted to be helpful as much as I can, but because I wasn't able to put myself in their position, it was a lot harder, because it's hard to talk about these type of feelings, especially when you're still not recovering, and it's hard to admit the way you're feeling while still not going through that help and recovery and realizing what you're going through. So I feel like what Ian said about getting the help and how he felt and what he experienced, it really shed a new light on my world, and everything that he's told me has helped me to bring and support the people I need to the most in a way that I didn't know I needed to before.
Having gone through this experience of chatting with someone in recovery in a podcast form, do you think it's something that more young people should get the opportunity to do?
I 100% believe that we should have this sort of thing in education. I think we should have these sort of chats
in high school so that we can see the effects that it can have in life. So I 100% believe that people should take up this kind of opportunity whenever they can, if they ever get the opportunity, or seek it out if they ever see that there is some sort of opportunity. So I 100% agree.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful. I was homeschooled, but I can picture that being very useful for people. I feel like a lot of the time, like our whole project is kind of to do with, instead of adults coming in and speaking to young people, you level with them. So we're coming in as young people speaking to other young people. So if you're going into schools and there's people who are being pressured by their friends, or they've made that decision on their own but they're thinking, oh gosh, what am I doing? Then that might give them the extra push to sort themselves out, or, it would probably turn kids away from the idea of doing anything like that, to actually hear someone's story instead of see a CGI video about it.
With the experience at Eternal Media, how was it for you?
I really enjoyed it. I really like all of the professional sort of things when it comes to filming, audio and video and stuff like that. I recently did a music studio recording session and I really enjoyed that. And podcasts I've not had as much experience in, but I really, really enjoyed it, yeah.
I love coming here. I love the experience. I love meeting with Ian. Ian was amazing. I love meeting with you guys. You always make everything seem so simple and relaxed. There's never any pressure to, like, you have to do this in a certain way. It's very, I think, freeing and made in a very comfortable way, so it doesn't bring too much anxiety, and I appreciate that.
It's been an absolute pleasure working with you guys again. I'm so chuffed that you asked us to come and be involved in this project. I mean that because it's been amazing for our young people, and hopefully these podcasts will go and be used as an educational resource which will help other people. It's given me so many ideas, actually, and the benefits of having these conversations within schools, and why can't addicts go into schools and have these conversations? Why can't people who've been bullied go into schools and have these conversations? Instead of being taught A to B, put the person in the room and have the discussions with young people, because I think that's the most powerful way of having an influence.
I think there's nothing more powerful than testimony by someone who has lived experience of anything. Hey, we're going to wrap it there. Thank you all so much for being part of Knowing the Score podcast, and we hope they're going to help a lot of people and even stop them from going down the kind of roads that myself and the guys you interviewed ended up going down. Well, that's a wrap for this series. Thank you to all our guests who spoke so fantastically and openly and honestly for us. Mind Our Future, the youngsters that came along to interview them, to North Wales Area Planning Board who funded the project. I hope that everybody who listened found the series useful and educational and informative. The series was always intended to be rolled out to schools, colleges, and anybody who can make use of it in a non-commercial way. If you'd like to let us know your thoughts on the series, get in touch at hello@eternalmedia.co.uk. A personal message from me: we put this series together because my drug and alcohol education was so terrible at the school I went to. I don't know what it's like today, but we just thought we wanted to help anyway. We got the youngsters to interview the experts, an incredibly inspirational and moving series for everybody involved. And hopefully you too. Thank you to North Wales Area Planning Board for having faith in us to deliver this project, and for allowing us to take it in the direction it needed to go in. It wouldn't have been possible without them. Thank you to everybody involved once again. Thank you for listening. And goodbye from us all at Eternal Media for this series.